the deeper meaning or the true meaning of Jesus by taking him to literally his meaning. You must be born again didn't mean where Nicodemus went with it. Where Nicodemus went with it, as Nicodemus recognized, was a foolish concept. How can an adult, an old man, be born anew? What Jesus is talking about was he was inviting Nicodemus to quit slinking around, to quit hiding about the concepts and the insights that Nicodemus saw and knew, but wasn't yet ready to name publicly. He comes to Jesus by night. And so the womb imagery is a place of, the womb is a safe place, but it's a dark place. It's a place to be formed. It's a place, but it's not a place to stay. One has to move from the womb, the hiddenness of the womb, in order to live life fully. And so Jesus is saying to Nicodemus, quit hiding in a womb-like existence. Bring into the light the truth that you know. So what do we know about this Nicodemus? Well, we know that he was a Pharisee, and we know that the Pharisees were one of the religious groupings in Jesus' day, ones who particularly prided themselves in living by the law, and they found themselves living in the illusion when Jesus came and began to preach that he was a new revelation of God. They found themselves in resistance to that revelation because it was turning on its head a lot of the Mosaic law. It was taking revelation to new places by fulfilling the law. So Nicodemus, we're told he was actually an elite member. He wasn't just a Pharisee. He was part of the council, part of that exclusive, powerful group of people in that day who controlled the religious life of Israel. So he has esteem, he has power, he has influence, and as you remember from the sermon just, was it last week or 2 weeks ago? Does Jesus still cleanse temples? John records that Jesus had gone into the temple and really offended the powerful. He'd upset the economic system of injustice that was taking advantage of people's desire to worship God and to be in obedience to the law, and they were manipulating that wish by extorting money out of people and turning the temple into a place of economic advantage. And so Jesus had upset that whole system. So the Pharisees and the religious leaders are furious. And they begin to discredit Jesus. We know from the gospel stories, some discredited him as kind of riffraff. He's a troublemaker whom you don't take seriously. And some didn't treat him as an embarrassing riffraff. They saw him as truly a very dangerous revolutionary that best be killed before he stirs up too many people by his good news gospel preaching. So Nicodemus is part of that crowd that is coming to these places of judgment, of concluding that Jesus was not to be taken seriously, or taken seriously but confronted and overturned. But Nicodemus has insight. He sees the light. We know you are a teacher. Who was the we? Was he speaking for others on the ruling council? Were there other Pharisees who were saying the same thing, who were seeing the same thing? A person wouldn't be able to do these kind of miracles unless God was with him. So Nicodemus, although he slinks around to approach Jesus at night, so his powerful friends don't see him come alongside Jesus, he still addresses Jesus with a title of respect. Rabbi was a title that one used to honor someone who you knew had wisdom beyond themselves. So Jesus uses this imagery. I love the way Jesus invites people out of the places where they're still hiding, out of the places where they're still haven't found the courage to embrace him. And Jesus creatively, calls them out. And I suspect, were we to tell our stories, we'd have similar stories of how Jesus creatively got our attention, assuaged our fears, had us step forward into his grace. Come into the light. And so Jesus uses this born-again imagery in order to communicate a truth that he was inviting Nicodemus to take advantage of the wind of the Spirit, the breath of God. This born again that I'm talking about, it has to do with anointing and breath and wind that blows. You don't know where it's coming from. It has to do with taking advantage of light to come out of darkness. I finished up a book this week that I started the week before by J.D. Vance, Hillbilly Elegy. It's one of the books on the New York best-selling list right now. It's a fascinating book. I'm not recommending it if you are one who offends quickly by vulgarity, because it's a true story of this man who grew up in what he calls hillbilly culture. He actually grew up in Ohio, but he charts how the poor working whites moved out of Appalachia to pursue economic opportunity up into Ohio and up into Michigan and up into that coal or that steel mining primarily industry. And they moved in masses. And he tells his own story of his grandparents traveling that road out of Appalachia and settling into Ohio to pursue the good life. And he says, they achieved in many ways what they went after, because they achieved a middle-class economic income and stability, but they carried with them their poverty mindset. And they carried with them their dysfunctional behaviors, their ways of communicating and resolving conflict, et cetera, that has today, after the economy collapsed so severely in so much of that part of America, has so many of these communities in severe crisis. So he writes personally as one who grew up in that culture, but has escaped it. He talked about his mother, an addict who moved from one man to another. Sometimes the man moving into her home, and he, the son, being drawn towards a father figure who seemed like a good man, or being repelled from a tyrant, only to have that man be kicked out and it being another. And sometimes, instead of the man moving in, he and his siblings and mother would move into their home. And as he grew up, the immense pain and trauma that imparted into his life. There's hints in the book that J.D. is a man of faith, but it's written for a secular audience, so he doesn't talk about that. But for our purposes today, I'm going to name what he names as the things that saved him, that got him out of that darkness into light. He names three things, and then I observe one. He names the reality that he had a highly protected hillbilly grandmother as one of the protective persons who helped save him out of the darkness. He talks about being exposed to a number of stable marriages and stable homes where he'd be invited home to a friend's place, and you'd encounter people who talked, husbands and wives who talked with each other without screaming at each other, who resolved conflicts without throwing things across the room and breaking things. And it rattled his brain. It's like, how can this be? But it gave him a hint and a picture that not every home was like his home. Not everybody lived the way that he did. So that exposure to some stable homes saved him. Again, I'm using saved in its broader terms, in that the spiritual condition. But it saved him out of the mess and the chaos. He credits very much his girlfriend, his wife, who grew up in a stable environment, and when they first began to try to resolve their conflicts, she saved him. You need to find a way to fight with me without either running, shutting down and running, or becoming violently explosive. You know, what are these two extremes? Let's talk. Let's figure out how to resolve this matter. And she persisted in loving him and accepting him. Accepting is the wrong term, but giving him unconditional love while inviting him to learn a new way. So those are the three things he names in the book. I would note also his brilliance. He gets out of that system. He actually gets accepted into Yale. So he's a brilliant man. I'm not sure that he adequately credits that reality in escaping the system. But regardless, he acknowledges along the way that get out of that dysfunctional kind of system. At some point, people have to stop blaming everybody else. They have to decide, do they want to be born anew? Do they want to come out of the darkness and into the light? So for him, it meant he had to stop blaming everything on his mother. He had to decide, what was he going to do as a man? He had to stop blaming the government and the system and take responsibility for his own actions. What Jesus is telling Nicodemus. You have to quit looking around, hiding the insight that you know. You have to embrace it and step forward into the light. And so we know from John's Gospel that Nicodemus began to go down that path. Chapter 7, where we're told that this Nicodemus would come to Jesus earlier in our story, that when the ruling council is wanting to seize Jesus and shut him down, Nicodemus speaks up and says, well, now wait a minute, in our system, doesn't the man have a right to defend himself? And then Nicodemus shows up again at the end of John's Gospel when Joseph of Arimathea goes to the tomb, takes the body to the tomb, Jesus' body, and it says Nicodemus accompanies him. Actually provided 75 pounds of myrrh and spices to anoint the body. So John says, I think it's in chapter 7 text, he says that Nicodemus became counted in their number, became known as a follower of Jesus. Somehow, he found the courage to step forward out of the darkness into the light, to be born again. So, we all live in the shadows. None of us are yet perfect. again. Because literally, that first being born again is that transaction of our soul getting right with God. It's that embracing of the work of Christ. That's a born-again experience. But the biblical definition of born again, it's bigger than that. If you do that, and that's where you stop, pity you. The invitation over the lifetime is to be born again. And if God gives you new insight of the dark places, to be born again. Into a new identity. And then if God gives you more insight to the wounded places, to be born again. So maybe we justify our expenditures when we're desperately in debt. We keep spending and going deeper and deeper. Maybe that's a dark place that you haven't yet brought into the light. Maybe we keep pushing people, we keep letting people around us push our emotional buttons instead of figuring out, doing the hard work to ask, what wound in me makes it such that they can push that button and make us say things that we regret saying. Maybe we keep quiet while a friend tells a racist or sexist joke, or maybe we even add our voice. Maybe we feed into the stereotypes of minorities and religious groups around us. Maybe we keep expressing our anger in destructive ways, excusing ourselves because of what he or she did to me. We all have the shadow places that yet to heal. Invitation to death. I had a profound experience of grace this week. I went again to the school here for training down in Indianapolis. Worship was again speakers were created. I had signed up, as I always do, for seminars. And the one that I signed up for was, one of the four that I signed up for, was titled The Rise of a White Nation. I discovered when I got there that the EMS professor teaching this workshop was a young, very, very dark-skinned African-American man. And he was profoundly well-trained in the subject. Here's what I know. You would anticipate stereotypically that if it's an African-American black man talking about the rise of a white nation, talking to a white audience, that by the end of the seminar we would feel shame and guilt. They told us at the beginning, this isn't in response to today's politics. He prepared the seminar 2 years ago. He's been teaching, and he was right. He was rushed for stuff going on. What he tracked was the way that our nation has used systemic racism to create systems of injustice. He talked about how the response in the 50s to Brown versus Board of Education, which made it illegal to segregate schools, led to systemic racism such that today
walked up to that young African-American professor, shook his hand, full integrity, looked him in the eye, and said, "You imply Jesus just emanates out of you." Because in the end, he said, in the kingdom of Jesus, I'm not defined by my black skin, and you're not defined by your white skin. We're part of a kingdom of Jesus. But he took us to this text, and he said the key is, will we embrace our new identity? Will we be born again into a new identity, willing to face truth and step out of darknesses into light? A kingdom full of justice and mercy, grace, truth. Jesus and gospel has always set people free by inviting them out of one set of loyalties to principalities, Paul calls them systems of injustice, into new loyalties. It doesn't give answers as to what it all means, but it doesn't just mean pretending that there isn't darkness. It doesn't mean staying in the womb. It means inviting the Spirit of Jesus to have us be born again. And again. And again. Partakers. And workers. And applauders. Little enclaves on the face of the earth exists in the hearts and the lives of God's people. For the benediction today, I'll invite you to be praying again the prayer, the Lord's Prayer. Today, I invite you to lift out as we pray it. Prayer that God's kingdom would come, and God's will would be done